Chapter-14 Crafts and Industries. Let's learn. Popularity of Indian industries, decline of Indian industries, establishment of new industries, iron and steel industry, coal mines and mining industry, paper industry. In the previous chapter, you read how the British rule was established in India and how it affected the political, social, economic and cultural fabric of the country adversely. The colonial policies of the British were responsible for the decline of traditional Indian crafts and industries. This was accompanied by a systematic drain of wealth from India to Britain during the British rule. Brain tickler. Name any 3 handicraft products that you use in your daily life. Popularity of Indian industries. The published accounts of European travelers show that India in the 17th and early part of the 18th century was economically more advanced than more of the European nations. It had flourishing Indian centers, the products of which were well known all over the world for their quality, low cost and craftsmanship. Traders from various parts of the world visited India and exchanged their gold and silver with Indian goods such as cotton textiles, tobacco, indigo, silk, brocades, etc. This unique feature of India's economy attracted widespread notice by almost all foreign traders. The Mughal emperors also encouraged foreign trade, since it was very profitable for them too. Thus, at a time when commercial and industrial revolution took place in Europe, India was regarded as the richest nation of the world. InfoHive. In pre-British era, India was the largest producer of cotton textiles in the world. After the East India Company established its hold over Bengal in 1757, its earnings from taxes began to be utilized to buy Indian goods. Thus, Britain no longer needed to send gold and silver to buy the same. Thus began the process of draining of India's wealth. Decline of Indian industries. There were several factors responsible for the decline of Indian industry in the 18th and 19th centuries. Earlier, Indian handloom had a big market in Europe. Indian textiles such as cotton, linen, silk and woolen goods already had markets in Asia and Africa. The Industrial Revolution first began in England, and by the end of the 19th century, it spread out to many countries of Europe and the USA. The countries to which the Indian Revolution spread had their social and economic life completely transformed. InfoHive. Taxes are paid to the government on goods that are bought or sold. Industrialization in England. With the coming of industrialization in England, the textile industry there made significant headway. There was now a reverse flow of textile trade between Britain and India. There was a massive import of machine-made clothes from English factories to Indian markets. This import of large amount of products manufactured on mechanical looms in England led to increased threat for the handicraft industries, as the British goods were sold at a much cheaper price. The British succeeded in selling their goods at a cheaper price, as foreign goods were given free entry in India without paying any duty. On the other hand, Indian handicrafts were taxed heavily when they were sent out of the country. In 1720, the government in Britain passed the Calico Act, which banned the import of printed cotton cloth into England. Besides, under the pressure of its industrialists, British government often imposed a protective tariff on Indian textiles. Therefore, within a few years, India, from being an exporter of clothes, became an exporter of raw cotton and an importer of British clothes. This reversal made a huge impact on the Indian handloom weaving industry, leading to its virtual collapse. It also created unemployment for a large community of weavers, as domestic demand for expensive and intricate fabrics from Indian rulers, nobles and landlords, etc., also dried up, with more and more territories being taken over by the British. Many of these craftspeople migrated to rural areas to work on their lands as agricultural labourers. This in turn put increased pressure on the rural economy and livelihood. This process of uneven competition faced by the Indian handloom industry was later dubbed by the Indian nationalist leaders as deindustrialization. The main aim of the British was to transform India into a consumer of British goods. As a result, textile, metalwork, glass and paper industries were soon out of work. By 1813, the Indian handicrafts lost both their domestic as well as foreign markets. Indian goods could not compete with the British factory-made products where machines were used. The markets were now captured and monopolized by Britain by means of war and colonization. The British extracted money from the Indian rulers, merchants, zamindars, and even the common people. Added to this drain were the profits made through trade and also the salaries of the officials, which were paid out of the locally raised funds. It was evident that their colonial economic policies were meant to serve the interests of the East India Company and later the British Empire. Info Hive. Tariff. An official list or table showing the duties or custom imposed by a government on imports or exports. Brain tickler. Why did handloom weaving not die in India? De-urbanization. As the textile industry declined, the towns and other urban centers that grew around these industrial hubs felt the greatest impact. The major centers of textile production which underwent de-urbanization were Murshidabad and Decca in the east, Patan, Surat and Ahmedabad in the west, Jaipur, Banaras and Lucknow in the north, and Madras and Masulipatanam in the south became ghost towns. Establishment of new industries. When the Indian industry was on its rapid decline, the policy of free trade was being advocated in Europe. British government then threw the Indian market open to the European world. Foreign capital began to flow into the urban industrial sector. It was initially invested into foreign trade and plantation industries. After 1848, large amount of foreign capital was invested in India for the construction of railways and communications, which revolutionized the entire process of industrialization of the country. The second half of the 19th century saw the emergence of a few modern industries in India. These were mostly owned by wealthy Indian businessmen. Various industries such as textiles, coal mining, paper, iron and steel, etc. came up during the latter half of the 19th century. Info Hive. Jute industry, the local handicraft of Bengal, faced initially tough competition from the jute mills of Scotland. In 1855, the first spinning machine was set up in Bengal. By the end of the 19th century, Indian jute came to monopolize world supply. Cotton industry. The first successful cotton mill was set up in Mumbai in 1854 by Kavasji Nanabhai. Handloom was used for weaving clothes. Mumbai was an important port for the export of raw cotton from India to England and China. Mumbai was close to the vast black soil area of western India, best for growing cotton. By 1900, over 94 mills were operating in Mumbai. Later, several other mills were set up in Ahmedabad and Kanpur. Many of the cotton mills were set up by Parsi and Gujarati businessmen of India. Rapid growth of cotton mills led to a demand for labor. Thousands of peasants and artisans moved to cities to work in these mills. The first jute mill was established in 1855 at Rishra, Bengal. Iron and steel industry. Charles Weld, an American geologist, and Jamshedji Tata were the founders of iron and steel industry in India. Tata Iron and Steel Company's Tisco steel producing plant at Sakchi, now Jamshedpur, was established in 1907 by Jamshedji Tata. Soon many iron and steel factories were set up in Bengal and Mysore. These industries played a major role in the growth of engineering industries, and soon coal mining, sugar, cement, paper, glass, matches and chemical industries began springing up. Coal mines and mining industry. Coal is one of the most important commodities of modern economic life. Expansion of the railways in India had provided a huge market for rails that Britain produced. With the growth of industries and the expansion of railways, the demand for coal kept on increasing, fueling the coal industry. Coal was also required in the iron smelting process, which began in 1874. In 1774, John Sumner, a retired mining engineer, was sent to India at the suggestion of Warren Hastings to explore the possibilities of coal mining in India. Mr. Jones found the prospects of coal mining in India very bright. He opened a mine at Raniganj. By the mid-19th century, coal mining started on a major scale, and the coal mines of Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha began supplying huge quantities of coal to supply the energy demands of many newly established industries. Paper industry. The manufacture of paper by hand had existed in India for centuries, but the successful production of paper through machines had started sometime in 1870 with the establishment of Bally mills in Hooghly. It started producing paper with a single machine only. Bally mills produced nearly 5,000 tons of paper per year. The second paper mill was established at Lucknow in 1879. Despite the progress made by Indian industries, the pace at which they grew till independence was extremely slow. The industries were very few in number and could be found only in some areas. Further, a number of these were owned by the British, and hence the profit earned was sent to Britain. Also, the British took no steps to protect these fledgling industries and followed free trade policies where import duty levied on foreign goods was very low, and Indian manufacturers had to face stiff competition from the British machine-made goods. However, during the First World War 1914 to 1918, when the British industries were flooded with military orders, industries in India began receiving large orders from the overseas as well as the domestic markets, which revived them. The changes that occurred in the crafts and industries under the British rule played a vital role in the rise of nationalism in the 19th and 20th century. There was continuous opposition to India's drain of wealth and the failure of the British government in developing the Indian resources. During the nationalist movement, foreign cloth was boycotted and hand-woven cloth was promoted to protect the Indian textile industry. Dadabhai Naoroji was the first to acknowledge that the poverty of Indian people was due to the British exploitation of Indian resources and the drain of India's wealth to Britain. Dadabhai Naoroji is also known as the Grand Old Man of India. He wrote the book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, in which he highlighted that throughout the British rule in India, there was a continuous drain of India's wealth to Britain. Brain tickler. Which state is the largest producer of writing or printing paper in India? Elsewhere. Industrial Revolution in the United States. Industrialization began in the United States when Samuel Slater emigrated from Britain to Rhode Island in 1789 and set up the first textile factory on the U.S. soil. He did this from memory, having left Britain without notes or plans that could have been confiscated by the British authorities. Francis Cabot Cowell of Massachusetts visited Britain from 1810 to 1812 and returned to set up the first power loom and the first factory combining mechanical spinning and weaving in the States. Railroad construction in America boomed from the 1830s to 1870s. The American Civil War from 1861 to 65 was the first truly industrial war, the increasingly urbanized and factory-based North fighting against the agriculture-focused South, and industrialization grew explosively afterwards. By 1900, the United States had overtaken Britain in manufacturing, producing 24% of the world's output. Recap. India in the 17th and early part of the 18th century was economically more advanced than most of the European nations. In 1720, the government in Britain passed the Calico Act, which banned the import of printed cotton cloth into England. The process of uneven competition faced by the Indian handloom industry was later dubbed by the Indian nationalist leaders as deindustrialization. After 1848, a large amount of foreign capital was invested in India for the construction of railways and communications, which revolutionized the entire process of industrialization of the country. Various industries such as textile, coal mining, paper, iron and steel, etc. came up during the later half of the 19th century. In the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi asked the people to boycott British cloth and use Indian hand-woven clothes.